Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Binjo. I am a nutrition student from Massachusetts University as well, so I'm very glad to introduce our last presenter, Planet Kim Pate. Kim Pate was appointed to the Senate of Canada on November 10, 2016. First and foremost, the mother of microbe and medicine. She is also a national renowned advocate who has spent the last 14 years working in and around the legal and penal system of Canada, with and on behalf of some of the most marginalized, victimized, criminalized, and institutionalized, particularly imprisoned young men and women. So let's welcome Kim Pate.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much. What an incredible day this has been. I'm very pleased to have been invited. The time has come. What can I say? And I remiss because I came here this morning. There was a land acknowledgement, but I want to say it's a huge privilege during Mi'kmaq History Month to be in Mi'kma'ki. Most of you know I usually hail from, these days, the place that I live and work on the shores of the Kitchissippi in the unceded, unsurrendered territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabeg, otherwise known to many folks as Ottawa. I also want to recognize the colonial impact, particularly in this part of the country, of forced labor and exploitation of those of African descent who are on Turtle Island. Those of you who know the work I've been doing, I hesitate. I actually just want to hear more from you. But anyway, I think the time has come. I wish I could tell you I had the ideas and the knowledge and the wherewithal to make it happen right now, because if I could, I would. Those of you who know me know the entire reason I accepted when I was approached about the Senate by groups of folks that I've had the privilege and responsibility to work with for decades. People who are in my circle, who I love, who have experienced so much of what we've heard, especially in the last two speakers, described, is why, when I was approached, I actually started to think about this. Why? Because from the moment 40 years ago that I started law school just up the road here and started at Dalhousie Legal Aid, it became really clear to this working class kid who was in the process of transitioning class that it wasn't a function of who caused the greatest harm, who came before the courts, who were picked up by the police, who were imprisoned. It was a function of their level, or more to the point, their lack of privilege and resources and opportunities. And you might think I should have known that, given that I was one of the few. My daughter just became the second in our family to obtain post-secondary education. Maybe I should have realized that. It certainly was visceral, but I hadn't the analysis that I then came to learn by virtue of education that so many people close to me have also been denied. But it was the links between substantive inequality and the opportunities that the Senate, as the Supreme Court of Canada said we were supposed to be doing, could have to look at how we actually move from a place of having a place full of full of white noise, quite frankly, and full of what my Maori friend described as male, pale, stale folks. And I thought, okay, let's see what we can do with this, because one of the mandates, if you will, one of the objectives, one of the responsibilities of senators is to represent the interests of those who often aren't represented in Parliament, particularly by elected officials, because they are interested in issues that often don't capture the attention, the votes of the most privileged and the most resourced. Recently, I was encouraged to not talk about the language that the court uses of minority interests, but what the On Can Canada youth group, who I've had the privilege and responsibility of engaging with, calls the intentionally ignored. That's where I think our biggest problem is. Sheila has said it, Wayne said it, Kendall said it, Paul said it. I mean, why am I saying it again except to reiterate, and sorry, Jen said it as well, sorry. Those of you who know me, I know I'm also getting old, and so postmenopausal memory sometimes is a challenge. So why aren't we there? I think the biggest reason we're not there is many people, just as we heard the usual question we all get asked, if any other system failed, aside from our prison system and our policing system, so okay, any system that fundamentally served the most privileged failed as much as our social, economic, and health systems failed the least privileged, the most marginalized, the most intentionally ignored, then we would have those reforms. We've seen it during this pandemic. Who got assistance and who did not? During the break, Sheila and I were talking about what's going to happen. All the data that's in there that has buttressed the arguments for basic income, for a guaranteed livable income for the last decades since the Kroll Report. The Kroll Report, as Sheila mentioned this morning, 50 years ago, senators said we have to end poverty. They recommended basic income. The Status of Women recommended. Just recently, the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls Inquiry. When I was visiting northern communities and speaking to elders, they said, yeah, we'd rather have, of course we need drinkable water, of course we need housing, of course we need food equality, we need sustainable development as well. But why do we have a social assistance scheme that says in order to be eligible for the criminally low assistance rates throughout this country, you have to pretend that you're looking for non-existent jobs when you could be out on the land, you could be learning your language, you could be engaged in entrepreneurial opportunities, as has already been discussed. And I know there are many people interested in this, but I am extremely worried post-pandemic. The $3.5 to $5 billion, depending on whose figures you use around poverty and abject poverty, who have not been assisted, who are increasingly on the streets. What are the numbers going to look like as we come out of this pandemic if we continue to focus only on things like GDP as a measure of economic growth or economic recovery and not human development and human welfare? So there are, you've already heard 50 senators, 49 joined as well. It was Frances Lankin and I. Frances is very interested in gig economy, and I'm obviously interested in some of these issues. We're both interested in them. There are also many other senators interested. And many of us are trying to figure out it as recently as yesterday. I think it was yesterday, I've lost track. So I've been in the prisons the last couple of days and I always get a bit disoriented after that. But just in the last 2 days, Senator Duncan, who's the Yukon, the senator, the only senator in the Yukon, and I wrote trying to counter a Fraser Institute, the usual sort of arguments about why we shouldn't have a basic income. So there are many, many senators interested. There are many members of parliament interested as well. You heard about Julie Dershowitz. You didn't hear about Wayne Easter, who on the Finance Committee, or Senator, whose name has just gone from my head, conservative senator who chairs the Senate Finance Committee. Both also have an interest in guaranteed livable income. For various reasons may not voice it as vocally as some others. But there's a growing push for it. And I am convinced we will see something. Next week I'm visiting PEI, and I'm hoping that will also. We know PEI, Yukon want to embark on something. And if it's money alone, the relative resources needed to embark on it in those two, one province and one territory, will be minimal compared to the numbers even that people are, the most exorbitant figures are being put out. But fundamentally, it's a lack of political will to take care of people. And one of the deficits of our position in the Senate is that we can't initiate money, what are called money bills. So I'm still planning to introduce something. I'm trying to figure out how to work around, so lest any of my colleagues are watching, yes, I'm going to try and figure out how to work around the money component of it, but looking at how we can actually start to push to put something in place. Because it's not for lack of knowing that it hasn't been done. I think we have to call out every member of Parliament and senator who is against moving in this direction as clearly not caring. There's no other explanation. Because if you care about what happens to people, you will move towards, you will end boil water advisories, you will ensure there are housing strategies, you will ensure that everybody has access to good food. We won't continue to rely on food banks and charity and you know, that's all great. I'm not against, I worked for NGOs for 40 years, but that should not be the source or the pretext, at least, that we are achieving any kind of substantive equality in this country. And so I wish I could have a rousing, you know, there's about to be an announcement. There isn't about to be an announcement as far as I can tell. We thought there might be when we saw the CERB rollout and how quickly the government could pivot when it wanted to. So we have to create the will, and I include myself in this. I'm not suggesting this is a job for you. This is a job that I am part of, and I take my responsibility very seriously. We have to create the will. Some of you know I've done it in different ways, in different speeches. I won't let any budget bill or any estimates bill go through our chamber without reminding every single one of us what's missing from it. I've tried to even kick out a few of those money bills. That didn't make me really popular in there, but I'm not there for popularity. I'm actually trying to get some of the changes. And quite frankly, I've got 13 years left there unless I cark it or quit before. And we have to get it. I am convinced we will get it. I want it to be sooner than later. So one of the challenges I'm putting out to you, not that I expect you, as I say, to do my job, but even if you just take a minute or two to email or call your member of Parliament, the senators from this region, most of them are on side, but just to remind them that this is something you want to see them work on. This is something that is a priority for people in their community, in your community. And the fact that we know how to achieve this is already there. The Basic Income Network has set out the costing of it. Hugh Segal has talked about it for years. Our Anti-Poverty Caucus, which is, as you've already heard, is a cross-chamber caucus that before the election, Nate Erskine-Smith and I co-chaired. I don't know who will co-chair. If someone else wants to do it, that'll be great, but we will continue to work on this. And we need to have a comprehensive approach that guaranteed livable income is part of, but also that pharmacare, dental care, mental health care, food security, and I actually believe free education, because the reason I came to this thinking was because I was able to get an education. Nobody who comes from the place I came from as a kid could now get the 4 degrees that I have been able to get, or be in the kind of positions I was able to be in because of the cost, the exorbitant cost of education. And that is criminal as well. And whenever someone says, how do we pay for it? Well, we actually asked the parliamentary budget officer to cost it. And the parliamentary budget officer said if we implemented this and gave a whole bunch of ideas in building on the work that Basic Income Network had done, said that we could actually cut poverty in half in this country in just 1 year. Just 1 year. That's amazing. I mean, it's not enough, but it's amazing that we could do it that fast. And if someone says, well, what about all of the other spending? You've already heard the other responses. I agree with those. I also think you tell them, go to an emergency ward. Walk out here and see where people are sleeping at night. Go to an emergency ward and see how many people are there with illnesses that are preventable if they had good food, if they had access to clean air, if they had access to clean water. How many of those health issues would not even be health issues? They're preventable. Go to the prisons. We were just in the prisons the last 2 days, and see how many Indigenous and Black prisoners are in there. And, you know, good luck finding one that's wealthy. Those are functions of how we have chosen, what policy decisions we have made to address poverty, racism, disability in this country. One of the heads of the institution we were in on Thursday said 98% of the individuals there had significant mental health issues. Now, part of his going to prison can create that as well. It certainly exacerbates mental health issues. And as you know, as I'm standing here, 44% of the women in federal custody are Indigenous, about 10% of the women are Black, and the numbers are higher for women than for men, which also speaks to the intersectional nature of the discrimination. We need to remind people of these realities, and if anybody who says that we can't afford it, point them to those systems that we never question. We never question. In the community near where I live, the province is looking at building a brand new jail. Watch for the costing that's going to come out as soon as the House starts sitting again about the cost of the new segregation units the government put in that they said that we're going to eliminate segregation. You will see they're going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of $500,000 per year to lock people up because they have significant histories of trauma and abuse, because they may have self-anesthetized and developed mental health issues as a result of that trauma and abuse. Those who are institutionalized because of the history of racism and misogyny they've experienced. That's where we don't question the funding. Well, I shouldn't say we don't, sorry. Too often that funding is never questioned. And yet think of what you could do with those resources, not just for those individuals who are currently in the segregated units in federal penitentiaries, but for the communities, the families, the communities they come from. And we need to start insisting that when people start raising economic arguments, we raise the counter arguments of what kind of society we want to live in. And it is not one that continues to treat too many people as though they are expendable and not worthy of the same human rights protections that every one of my colleagues expects every day. So, yes, I think the time has come. Yes, I think we will get there. When we will get there, I think largely depends on how much we disrupt, how comfortable my colleagues and those in the House of Commons are with continuing to do the same thing over and over and over again and expecting somehow it will yield different results. So I want to thank you very much. I'm sorry it's not a bit more uplifting. You can rely, if ever it looks like I've lost my way, I don't expect you to do my job, but certainly hold me to account, because this is an incredibly privileged position, and it's a place from which we must continue to do as much as we can to disrupt the status quo and ensure that we have the kinds of opportunities that our Charter of Rights and Freedoms guarantees, promises to everybody in this country. And right now, that is just not true, and it must change. So thank you very much for all the work you do. I feel incredibly humbled and honored to be invited here and to have the opportunity to continue to do some of the work that has been my life's work in a different fashion, but still to be welcomed into these circles. So thank you very much. Do you have questions?
Is this working? Yeah, it is. Thank you so much for your speech, Senator Pate.
Oh, just Kim, please.
Kim. And I want to sort of disagree with you. You said that your words aren't uplifting. And I think that your words are exactly what we needed to hear in order to continue the fight and move forward. So thank you.
Well, you're very kind. Thank you. Yeah.
So, yeah, I've been very moved by your words and by the words of everybody today. I really appreciate everything that has been said. I think it's been a wonderful conference so far, and I'm not closing out discussion. I just had to say that. So, is there a question? Are there questions? Okay, Kendall.
Thank you. So anyway, the parts of your speech where you talked about the specific problems that you mentioned around women, through my interviewing people, like, I'm not surprised that you brought up what you said about women, because women that I interviewed that are on income assistance compared to men, without getting into detail, I will mention that some of those stories have actually brought me to tears, like hearing from the women and the single moms who live on income assistance that we have here in Nova Scotia. And this is part of like why I brought up about how basic income would do a multitude of things to improve people's lives. So anyway, the abuse that some women get that a lot of women get is certainly uncalled for. I agree with you there. And along with many other things that you said, and I definitely agree that people need to be better educated on why people are in that situation. My question is even though the basic income piece of what you talked about is definitely important, do you have any ideas on how to educate the larger public? Like, for example, what I brought up, where there's 50% of people out there who believe that income assistance, that recipients should not even be receiving income assistance, like those type of people as examples. Those are the ones that need to be better educated on why people are like on that system in the first place. So is there any ideas you have as to how these people could be better educated?
Well, you guys are doing an incredible job of educating. One of the things that many of the young people who have come through the office I've been working with have been getting us to do is more things like, we have a podcast called Appointed, where we've had a lot of focus on, in fact, we just released an interview with Sheila. Paul's been on, and so we do that. Some of you know I'm slightly embarrassed that I started doing TikToks because many of the young people were asking questions about, and were confusing Senate of Canada with the Senate of the United States. And so that started as my daughter actually and her partner challenged me to start doing something that would educate. So my response was, as long as you don't expect me to sing and dance, if they're substantive. And so in 10 and 15 seconds, we've been trying to do that. Any other ideas people have, I'm game to try, because just recently I was picking my son up and he lives in an area that is lower income, and someone made a comment about, apparently his neighbor knew that I was now in the government and said, good thing they're stopping all those CERB checks, because they're all the neighbors bought mattresses. And I stopped and I said, well, I'm really glad that people were suddenly able to afford to buy a mattress. Clearly they needed mattresses, and if they bought them, and then it ended up in a very long conversation, and I don't know if he changed, but and my dad votes NDP now, so hey, and he was, working class guy in the military, so you can imagine where his voting started. So, no offense, Dad, if you ever see this, but so, I try to figure out all different kinds of ways to get the message out, but the work that you're doing, the understanding, I remember a speech in the Senate where I talked about the fact that you've already talked about today, which is that income when you're on social assistance or loans while you're on social assistance, as well as work, obviously, but loans are considered income. My colleagues were shocked. The banking guys came and said, that can't be possible. And I said, yes, it is. And so I sent them the policies. And so, part of it is getting people aware who have never, it's hard to believe for me that some people have gone through life and have no idea how many, many people live in this country. But anyway, I've now met a whole bunch who, lots of them do, but lots of them don't as well. And so part of it is continuing to try and sensitize. I don't know if that answers your question or not, but that's part of what we're trying to do.
Okay, thank you very much. Do we have any online questions? No? No. Okay, Jen.
Thanks. I was wondering if you could just speak a little bit about how people should go about reaching out to you or other senators or their local politicians. As a post-secondary educator, I think one of the things that I'm always up against is the universities now turn out job-ready students. That seems to be what post-secondary education is about, rather than engaged citizens. And so I think not completely gone are the days that you spoke about, but certainly they're waning, especially in the program I'm in, health professional program. We're in the business of training health professionals, not citizens. And so what then gets cut out of the curriculum are civics, like basic civics. And so the idea that a student, that a young person or anybody could write a letter to a politician and demand a response, like expect a response, seems to surprise many of the students that I have. They write advocacy letters as part of their assignments, and that's news to them. Yeah. So if you could give some practical advice for those in the room that maybe don't have an appreciation of that, because I think we assume too often that Canadians do. Right.
So every senator, their email address is their name, so kim.pate@sen.parl, sen, S-E-N for Senate, .parl for parliament.gc.ca. Our emails, our phone numbers are all publicly accessible. If people want to write, we still get a ton of mail, but I get a lot of mail from prisoners, so they don't have access to internet, well, I shouldn't say obviously yet. We're trying to work on getting them out, but in the meantime, get them access to internet as well. But so mail can come, and all you need is the name of the MP or senator, and put either House of Commons or Senate of Canada or just Parliament of Canada, and Ottawa, no stamp needed, sign it, and it comes to us. Pardon me? Well, Senators is K1A 0A4, and if you don't need the postal code, but and I think House of Commons is K1A 0A6, I think is that, Sheila's nodding, so yeah. So that's one way. You can also call us. Right now, a lot of folks aren't in the office, and so in our office, the phone is forwarded to my cell phone, so that's partly why I've sat over there trying to respond to things. But the other is to just call us up. I know that an increasing number, like you, of professors are doing, and I was teaching until recently still an intensive program at Dal until the pandemic, but one of the things a number of profs have gone to, which I think is great, is because I still am listed as adjunct for University of Ottawa, sometimes they'll get students to do a directed research where they can actually, and especially now that we've got so much more capacity to do it distance-wise, is have them do something in conjunction with us on some of the issues we're working on. So that's another way that more and more young people, we've had hundreds, I shouldn't say, I think we're about 100 now, since it'll be 5 years soon that I was in the Senate appointed, and I think we've had close to 100 students now through, because we take through, and Dal actually pays for 2 students to come from the law school every summer. So those are some options to try and encourage your university to do as well, or for you to do. And a number of profs are increasingly getting their students, in addition to do advocacy letters, do op-eds and get them published in there, or letters to the editor, get them published. And those, I think, are really important ways for civic engagement as well. And it's one of the things the folks who come through our office do. A lot of the new ideas are from the amazing leaders who I have the privilege of working with for a few months as they come through. Thank you.
Hi. I'm just, one reason why I'm in favor of a basic income is because I think it can really change the world, and I want to see a different world. And I'm wondering, when people talk about how much it will cost, I'm thinking, they're afraid. They're thinking, if we pay for basic income, we'll impoverish ourselves, or we'll lose something, or our country won't thrive. So, and I know, so it's not just, the dollar figures, though that's important to them, but it's that immediate, like, okay, something bad's going to happen if we do this. And I wonder if, I think, artists have a role in sort of envisioning, but I think we all can try to envision the world that maybe basic income could be one part of achieving. And I wonder if you have any thoughts on that.
Well, it's interesting you say artists. I absolutely agree. And I still remain hopeful that the number of people who, when the pandemic hit, had no idea they were 1 or 2 paychecks away from poverty themselves, in terms of cash poor. They may have had houses and other things, but their money situation was more precarious than they knew. And so there's a growing number of people. I think that's why the interest has mushroomed, if you will, publicly. But, those of us who were in government, those who had salaries and benefits and were protected, didn't feel the pinch in the same way. And, my family members and loved ones who are living in public housing felt it way more than I felt it, having, a little deck to go out on, and, the permission because I had a dog to walk the dog, so poor dog got walked, sorry, everybody was born with the dog because it was one of the ways during the lockdowns that you could go out. And so, but it's interesting, on Monday night I'm going to the first time to a performance by a friend who's a singer, and the Artists for Basic Income move is huge. And again, people who, didn't expect to be facing the kinds of, all through the pandemic, artists were expected to perform and entertain and raise our spirits. For what? With what? Meanwhile, they didn't have resources. Many of them weren't eligible for the CERB. And so I think there's a growing number who are, doing all kinds of creative things to raise the awareness that way. I do think, I'm trying to use examples of other countries where they've done things differently, like some of the Scandinavian countries where people don't complain about paying higher taxes because everybody is entitled to and gets access to food and education and housing, and so you don't see the same homelessness, the same crisis, health crisis. Well, you might see some health, but not the same health crises. And we know, as has already been said, that the pandemic has hit those who were already most challenged, not just financially, but those who were most discriminated against already most severely. And so, I don't want to feel like the artists need to keep doing that, but I can't believe they won't. And I think you will keep hearing that message in writing, in song, in theater. While I'm away next week, while I'm trying to do some stuff in PEI around this, there's going to be, one of the new productions is about homelessness, and I think, good, it's not that long ago. I'm not sure a play on homelessness would have attracted the kinds of numbers. They're sold out, and so those are, those all give me hope as well. And so, maybe I'm not really, I've never been described as Pollyannish, but I certainly have always. I remain hopeful. I wouldn't keep doing this if I weren't. So thank you for any other suggestions you have as well. That'd be great. And thank you for all your work.
We have time for another question, if there is one, or comment.
Sheila.
Sheila. Oh, good. Good.
I'm going to go sit down because it'll probably be something profound.
You don't need to be nervous about asking the question.
No, I hesitate to dominate. I want to get back to the last thing Kim said, which was about disruption. I've had some interesting conversations with people lately about how to approach politicians, how to talk to your MP. And for the most part, everybody says, like, be nice, be polite, find out what they're interested in, and all of that sort of stuff, all build relationships. And then I heard a young woman who's part of a group of young, I think mostly female, Black leaders who said other things. Don't be intimidated by them. Go in and tell them what you know and what you need. And one of the questions I thought was really interesting. So we know that the federal government has this target of reaching 50% reduction in poverty by 2030 or something. So go in and ask them to name the 50% of people they're going to leave out. Mm-hmm. Like, be a little bit more in your face. That I'm ready to go disrupt. Mm-hmm. So what do you think about that?
Well, I think it's great, but, you know, it's true that not everybody thinks, you know, we had this discussion actually yesterday, because in the prison, one of the men rightly said, and what the hell are you going to do about this, and how are you going to make sure it changes? And, you know, some of my colleagues were like, oh, you know, that wasn't very polite. And I said, well, I wouldn't be very polite either if I'd been sitting in jail for 30 years, you know, and that means he's 23 years past his warrant, his eligibility for release date, and he can't understand why he's still there. I probably wouldn't be very polite either. I'd be kind of angry. And in fact, that was pretty subdued as far as, you know, what you or I might do. And so some of it is also characterizing. I think it is right to, you know, some people that won't get, but, you know, they may not be the ones who are going to try and move. As Landon Pearson always says, you know, we want to shake the movers. And so I think we do have to, you know, continue to poke at those who are likely to want to keep moving on these issues. And so, yeah, I would, and if you're in any doubt, I mean, I would say contact all of the MPs and senators in this region. Almost all of them are already on side of the senators. I don't know necessarily about all the MPs, but yeah, I think, you know, get Andy to take this up in
Here he is, right here.
There, okay. Great. Sorry, Andy, I didn't know that was you. Yeah.
Good. Is there any?
Yeah, no, I mean, it was one of the things you may have seen. We were putting out every day a poverty fact that people should ask their candidates of, you know, what specifically are you going to do about X, Y, or Z? And you're entitled to know that. And, you know, you may think, oh, well, why ask the senators? Because it's pretty hard to get rid of us. But you know, but I think that shouldn't dissuade you from challenging us, because our responsibility is to represent as Samantha has said, those who are currently being intentionally ignored.
Well, I want to, I guess, thank you very much, Kim, for your talk and for your advocacy and for your championing of basic income within the Senate, within the larger government, and with your podcast and your TikTok throughout Canada. It's incredibly important what you're doing, and we certainly look to you and your words to help support what we're advocating for. So thank you. And I want to just mention that the letter that I talked about before that Kim Pate led, that was signed by 50 senators, I believe every senator from Nova Scotia signed that letter in support of a basic income. Champions within government are incredibly important. We need to work with them.
Yeah. No, thank you. And remember, we're public servants. We're supposed to be serving you, not the other way around. So,
Thank you.